My name is Nabil Sharif, and you're listening to Filmatic. It's a podcast that I like to call personal, chill, and thoughtful. It's also a podcast that my mother likes to call a waste of time. Okay, on today's inaugural show, we're going to discuss Joker, a film created by Todd Phillips starring Joaquin Phoenix. But first off, some movie news. If you'd like to skip right to the Joker review, please check the time code in the description. At the box office for the past weekend of this recording, that is the weekend of the 4th, Joker grossed a 4-day total of $106 million domestically, and at a current worldwide total of $260 million, this puts Joker at a huge profit, with its budget being $55 million. This just goes to show how I feel, which is that you do not need to blow your budget on a CGI-filled superhero cluster hellscape to reach audiences with an impact. Rather, a compelling story, performance, and modest ground-level marketing. I think this bodes well for the future of comic book movies, but I'll get into that further in the review. Not many new trailers of importance as far as I can see. However, in terms of new movies, El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie, comes out in 2 days from this recording, and I'm absolutely stoked. I know this is a film podcast, but if there ever was an exception to the rule, I think that Breaking Bad is completely deserved. It is one of the greatest pieces of media ever created, and probably the greatest TV show as well. Vince Gilligan was able to somehow create a layered, emotional, and incredible story that had immaculate direction in writing, and of course the all-star cast. I will definitely be doing a mini episode on this movie if it's good, and I have no doubt it will not. Gemini Man comes out this weekend as well, and does not seem to be forecasting for a good time at the box office. With a bloated budget spent on de-aging Will Smith, which, in all fairness, actually looks somewhat okay, but every other thing about this looks fake, it smells badly of a box office bomb. Time will tell, I guess, but I wish someone could utilize Will Smith right in a film for once. It feels like we haven't had anything come close to I Am Legend or Enemy of the State, which itself has flaws, I know. Sequel to the soft reboot that was Halloween released last year is now in production, titled Halloween Kills, and will feature Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie Strode again. I thought the first film was very solid and a fine horror thriller. I hope Blumhouse Studios can keep their train of very small budget, tight horror movies and making a huge return on it. Between the new Halloween and the Jordan Peele horrors coming out every year, it seems there's been a bit of revitalization of the genre, which is always good. Coming to you from the editing bay, and after talking with some of you and judging that it's probably best to ride the hype from yesterday's social media posts, and given that I've not seen Joker yet, but I will be this weekend, I've decided as a treat to work on the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood podcast and bring it to you ASAP. You're welcome and enjoy. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is the 9th film by Quentin Tarantino and his first film produced by Sony Pictures rather than his traditional companies of Miramax and the Weinstein Company, for obvious reasons. Fun fact, there was actually a huge bidding war between studios to get Tarantino. He decided to go with Sony due to their generous offer as well as creative freedom and audience reach. The film stars Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie, Al Pacino, Kurt Russell, and many, many cameos. The title itself is actually in regards to Sergio Leone's masterpiece, Once Upon a Time in the West. It's a nod to the Western genre influence on Tarantino's latest, both structurally and in the actual plot, and the way movies about the Old West play with actual history. Just as the traditional Western has often used real people and places as templates to tell fictional stories, Tarantino has crafted an ode to a time he's only experienced through books and movies. Think back to Inglourious Basterds and his portrayal of World War II through that. And yet, this is not the film that hardcore fans of Pulp Fiction and Inglourious Basterds may be expecting. It's somber at times in the way it seems to be trying to grab something just out of reach. Roger Ebert describes it as the promised potential of the people on the fringe of the City of Angels, an attempt to capture a mythical time when movies, real life, and imagination could intertwine. The majority of Once Upon a Hollywood takes place on a February weekend in 1969, introducing us to its two leads, TV actor Rick Dalton, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, and his longtime stuntman and BFF, Cliff Booth, played by Brad Pitt. Rick was the star of a hit Western show called Bounty Law, but he's struggling to figure out what lies for him next, more and more aware that his days of heroism are coming to a close as he ages out of Hollywood. And he's encouraged by an executive played by Al Pacino to go to Italy to reboot his career with spaghetti westerns. Cliff is way more chilled, however, the kind of guy who loves his dog almost as much as he loves Rick, and says what he means even to someone like Bruce Lee, whom he actually fights in one of the film's most crowd-pleasing scenes. Lee is only one of the familiar names in this film, as Tarantino populates the world around his fictional creations with real famous faces, from Steve McQueen to actor James Stacey. Firstly, let's talk about the cast. DiCaprio and Pitt absolutely kill their roles in this movie, especially Brad Pitt. Leo is the perfect choice for an aging movie star, in the sense that he brings some typical Hollywood charisma to show, and his frustrations building throughout the film add tension and much-needed relevance in the third act, which I will touch on in the spoiler section. Pitt tops Leo through his absolutely oozing of charisma and charm, akin to his character from Burn After Reading times 10 and put into 1970s Hollywood. It is clearly an intentional ironic choice to have a man in the movie of such raw talent and charm play the stuntman, although there is a mention of why he can't get any work, which is just beginning to show how much secrecy and depth there is to the character. Margot Robbie does a good job at playing Sharon Tate. There is much to be asked more of her in the script, although I guess there was purpose to it from Tarantino's perspective, but more on that in spoilers. The film is then scattered with many memorable characters who also bring much entertainment to their scenes, like Margaret Qualley's Manson scenes with Pitt, and Tim Oliphant's with DiCaprio, in what may be one of my favorite 3 scenes of the movie that I cannot wait to talk about. The writing and direction of this movie is so different, yet so Tarantino, that I can see why many got put off for tapered interest within it. It is a film that requires patience, and depending on how you define a good movie, it could be the best or the most non-movie film you've ever seen. It's kind of hard to breach that subject without entering spoiler territory, so I'll wrap up this section first. The 3 separate storylines are a pure mosaic of one of America's most formative eras of popular culture, and the film covers these many grounds twice over, and with just as much swagger and charm that only Tarantino could provide. I know not many have seen Jackie Brown, but it's like a mix of that with a few hints of Pulp Fiction. At every single facet of this picture, the filmmaking is perfectly on point. This is a Quentin Tarantino season with 8 movies after all, and with his direction and the absolutely gorgeous cinematography provided by Robert Richardson, it provides an aesthetic that I know will sound cheesy when I say it, but really and truly does make you feel like you're in 1970s Hollywood. Once you're immersed, the long runtime isn't an overbearingness as much as it is a gift. Now going to touch on some spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie yet, skip ahead. This movie was pretty tightly packed in my non-spoiler section, so I'd just like to take this time to touch upon a few key points and my favorite scenes. As I stated, the movie is extremely refreshing with so much tension building and subversion that once again could only be delivered so masterfully from the man, Quentin Tarantino. The scene at the Manson camp with Brad Pitt walking into the house, for example. The scene that really puts Pitt on the radar for Oscars is probably his badass fight with Bruce Lee, where he literally dents a car with him. Never have I seen an audience react so viscerally to such a well-choreographed fight, and then of course the deeper aspects of having a legend and symbol being brought down to human level through the fight, and the preceding and afterwards dialogue. The ending was absolutely insane, and peak Tarantino. I know that many people were a little bummed out when under their impression the entire movie would lead to a 15-minute climax, but I honestly don't think it was portrayed that way. The subversion comes back, the acid cigarette comes into play, and an absolutely hilarious exchange following by a badass killing of the Manson family by Brad Pitt. Finally, I'd like to talk about the absolutely masterful scene of Rick Dalton taping his show with James Stacey. Everything about this scene is why I love movies. First off, you have DiCaprio doing some of the best acting in his career, acting as another actor, as another character, all while portraying his frustration and the constant forgetting of the lines. Then the beautifully crafted shots being set up as shots within the movie, combine that with ambient noise in a full 25 minutes of that, I've never been more immersed into a movie viewing, I think. And overall, I believe that is what makes this movie so special. The ability to combine and change expectations to such a degree that immersion in the film is not just that of a surface level, but a multifaceted, philosophical, yet just plain fun time. And these are my overall thoughts of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I'd like to thank you for listening, and I appreciate you bearing with me to bring you this review, so you have something to chew on until I can see Joker, record, and edit that episode for next week. This has been Filmatic. I've been Nabil Sharif.